So Andy and I have spent 1 month away from each other. Oh, it's been so lonely. Exploring the topic of climate change, which we talked about in our last episode and shared our thoughts and apprehensions of. It is a remarkably divisive topic, and I believe it's even being explicitly fostered as one. So, of course, that's why we had to talk about it. But we both were neophytes to the material, the literature on the subject. So we spent a month away exploring. And I'll just immediately tell you, spoiler alert, a month is not long enough to dig into everything that's here. And then I was beginning to think, I was like, is this a vain and whatever semi-irrelevant topic, even though it's sort of evergreen? But then just this week, guys, just literally, I think this just was published, yesterday. There was a hurricane that ripped through chunks of the southeast portion of the United States, and the current president, Joseph R. Biden, was asked by reporters about sort of the disaster relief effort, how that was going, blah 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 blah. And they had asked, one had asked if climate change was to blame for this trail of devastation. Joseph R. Biden, noted scientist, responded absolutely, positively, unequivocally, yes, 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 yes. That staggered me. Perhaps not physically, but it literally made my shoulders move back and my head start to jolt in position. And I was saying to Andy offline, I was like, I can barely think of maybe 10 things I would respond that assuredly about. Andy talked about like us having, like, I have two eyes. I'm bipedal. I'm a human being. I love my wife and children. I believe in Jesus Christ. Like it's a religious or like fundamentally existentially confident answer from our president, who I think we've all noticed over the past 4 or 5, 6 years, maybe, is in a state of significant cognitive decline. So I don't know how cogent his thinking was even to say such a thing, but his answer was so resolute, and I eagerly await the fact checks on this statement, on this false. It's a falsehood for certain. Now, will I say absolutely unequivocally yes, 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 it's a falsehood? No, I'll just say it's a falsehood. And it led me to believe that what we are up to right now actually is vitally important, Andy, because that level of zealotry in the face of, at least in the past month, what I've gotten a sense of is an overwhelming amount of data. I looked at one sort of, what is it, like collation, an open letter that was published, a survey of over 88,000 studies. 88,000 studies, folks. The vast majority of our climate science comes from modeling studies, which are, I mean, you got to get in the weeds just to understand what inputs are put into the model in order to understand what outputs are salient, which means every single input, you would have to have a pretty exhaustive knowledge of how accurate that is related to what we do already know. I mean, it is a phenomenally comprehensive examination that would be required, even just to say yes to that question. And at least according to the various expert opinions, that's a crazy thing to say, that something is unequivocally. Every time one of these disasters happen, people go, we don't really know. Could it be? Sure. Might it not be? Sure. Like that's really where all of us, I know I'm skipping to the ending of this episode in a way, that's where all of us need to linger in, let's go ahead and say most things, most hot topic issues. I think I was just saying this earlier today somewhere else, that we should hold, if we don't actually have a really great defense, if we haven't even defended our own positions on things extensively, we should hold them very, 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 very loosely. Or try this, don't even hold a position on it at all. That's totally appropriate. Now, it's hard to in the modern era. If you're informed on something and you've actually defended your view, let's say hundreds of times, even then, you should still hold it loosely.
Indeed, I think one of the key concepts that brings us together and we come back to on this show is that of curiosity, which I think is what you're pointing out. And I think I'm fortunate to have that as a superpower. I mean, I know I have it, but I think that makes me fortunate. It can also lead to I don't know, lots of unanswered questions. And I think that is perhaps what drives such as you said, resolution in the president's voice, because people maybe increasingly are attracted to leaders who are very, very confident. And I think, without even going into disparaging comments, I think Trump demonstrated and accelerated the power of that in the last decade. But that's potentially overstated. There have been lots of leaders, especially presidents, over the centuries that have been very confident about all sorts of things. And this episode is fascinating. So, in the last episode, we sort of fumbled around this issue and revealed what we knew or how little we really knew. And then we landed on, especially because we knew we were going to take a little bit of a break for some work I was doing. We decided, gosh, wouldn't this be a good topic to zoom out a little and actually do a meta study on how we actually do research, how each of us does research in the context of trying to answer this question. And I think most of my contributions today will be about how I did research, which I think is quite revealing, just about how the internet currently is constructed. I'm guessing how many people sort of fumble through it in a very superficial way. And honestly, how confusing it is just for the average person trying to answer, especially we picked an arguably extremely complex topic in the sense that it's not just some little easy scientific study, or experiment. But I think it's a good one in that way because it connects and it attaches to all sorts of things. And like we were talking about, it's like, gosh, the climate affects, well, everything. And so therefore it affects lots of big businesses and therefore it becomes political extremely quickly.
Political and economic as well. I mean, which entangles with the political. But then there's multiple economic interests vying for dominance over whatever a narrative is. I'd read, I think I brought this up on the show before, but someone had said it to me and I just didn't believe it. I think when I first got out of college, someone was like, most people read it like a 4th grade or a 6th grade level. I was writing for MTV at the time, and they kept changing our scripts and saying like, you got to take some of these words. Some of these words are too long. Like people don't know these words. And I was like, I mean, we're kind of doing a grown-up show. This one's even especially little. I would say it's almost exclusively. It should be for grown-ups. It's almost a late, it's a little late nighty in its angle. And they were like, no, like people don't know. And you need to keep. I remember we posted up on the wall at one point. We printed it super large and blew it up, and it was like, they don't. What is it? Oh my gosh, they don't know these words, and you need to keep them in their place. And I was like, that may have been a typo, but it did sound like people are stupid, and we need to keep them that way. Now, I was writing for MTV, so maybe that literally was what they meant, but that was what they said. But I looked up not terribly long ago. I was like, okay, someone said that like half the country reads at like a 6th grade level. Now, reading is not the end all be all of someone's ability to take in wisdom or knowledge or understanding. However, it's a signifier, right? It's a data point. 57, I think, 57, 58% of the country reads at a 6th grade level or below. I would say if you read at a 6th grade level or below, trying to understand what's real in terms of the narratives around climate change would be statistically impossible. Not impossible. Maybe you're a great oral learner and you can't read for dyslexia reasons. Of course, there are always parenthetical exceptions one could make, which says to me that more than half of the country, I would say this safely, not unequivocally, absolutely, yes, but safely, shouldn't have a strong position on climate change one way or another. I was like, it would be in some ways it would be outlandish to have some sort of strong position and have some sort of be in some sort of crisis mode about it, right? I mean, we've seen a lot of these headlines over the past couple of years about like sort of climate related depression or like existential climate anxiety. Now, granted, this is mostly like left bias places in big cities that are talking about this, where again, the prevalence of such narratives may dominate as to create such an anxiety. But it's just, again, from cursory looks throughout my life and then a slightly more intense look this past month. Most of us, and I'm including myself, I read above a sixth grade level. I probably have since I was in second or third grade. I skipped second grade, third grade, since third grade. My daughter in third grade was reading at a sixth grade level. So to me, that's like, you know, like a eight or 9 year old. Think of it that way. Most of us shouldn't really be amped up about this issue at all, and shouldn't be all like, and also we shouldn't be amped up about other people's lack of being amped up about it. Just knowing that it's not even possible for people, for I would say most people in the United States of America, which is it's not in the top 10 of literacy. We're not doing that great in that. However, we're relatively educated, relatively affluent country in terms of the world. So we have a lot of leisure time with which to pursue informing ourselves. No one should be getting flipped out at anyone about this, no matter how existential it is, because it is, from my reading, who has far above a sixth grade level, it is enormously complicated. Like I looked at the masking studies, right? This is one of the things we started on in this podcast. Yes, some of the particulate related data was like, I'm not entirely sure, but in terms of the results, it's not difficult. Like literally, you could absolutely kind of figure it out. You could muddle your way through in terms of like, oh, out of that, this many people were infected and this many people weren't. You know what I mean? So you're ultimately just like, oh, how many people got sick? It's easier to reduce. But looking at science on climate, it's again, because it's all modeling studies, it's so comprehensive, y'all, that I think everyone needs to chill. And this is maybe the problem, is because it's so complicated, people then are like, it's too complicated to actually explain. We have to reduce it to do what we say or just believe me, because it's trying to convince or cajole or whatever. I mean, you look at An Inconvenient Truth, which turned out to be wrong about a whole bunch of things. That was a great attempt. I thought the film was excellent. But you're not really going to be able to give people an accurate view on what's happening if you're simplifying, and on something like this, if you're oversimplifying. That's just my like from taking that month, Andy. That was certainly my like to just the zoom out view of like, okay, we all need to come, even if it is an existential crisis. The way that we're talking to each other about it is so hilariously inappropriate. It's literally like screaming at children because they're not being like an 8-year-old because they're not good at trigonometry. I couldn't even say it. That's how hard it is.
I think that was as far as I got in math. Well, I appreciate that. I feel a sense of relief because, as usual, I'm sure you went much deeper than I did, and now I'm just, my reaction to that is, oh, well, great. I'm glad I didn't waste my time. There's one thing we haven't talked a whole lot about. I mean, part of my background is in coaching and assessments, and there's a body of work called Kolbe, KOLBE, and it's an assessment. I'm not actually trained in this one, but I've gone through it a number of times, and I know people who use it pretty reliably. And the point of it is to try to analyze how you instinctively solve problems.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And it really is interesting. And I have my Kolbe results, and I'm kind of like, I don't know, it'd be really interesting actually if we could get yours. Because hold on, I want to actually, I think I remember them, but I want to just look up the 4 categories to make sure. The one that is the most meaningful, or the 2 that are the most meaningful in this conversation, are quick start, which and it basically tells you there's four categories, and it tells you which one you initiate in. So when you're trying to solve a problem, you instinctively just go to one of these four channels
Yeah.
of action, and then there's kind of a secondary one, and then the other two. So I initiate in quick start, which is common for entrepreneurs. And the way I describe it is like, that's more like I'm going to jump. I see a swimming pool. Let's say we're both standing in front of a swimming pool.
Yeah.
I see it. I'm going to jump in and then start asking questions like, oh, is this water?
Yeah.
Are there sharks?
Yeah.
Are there, and at that point, it's like, well, it's kind of a dangerous way to gather information, right? I'm already in the pool. Um, and then my secondary quality is what's called fact finder.
Mm.
And that's more disciplined research. I don't think my research style is disciplined at all. It's very like scattershot. But I do like to collect information, and I like to collect it in various ways. And to the point made earlier, I actually really like to collect information through stories and conversations.
Yeah.
Way more than like researching and reading books and reports and stuff.
Yeah.
So my hunch is you're probably, I would guess you might even initiate in fact finder because you're so hardcore in that research quality. The other two are follow through and implementer. And follow through is just basically like, do you get shit done? And then implementer is actually, interestingly enough, like, do you like to work with your hands, quite specifically? So anyway, maybe we could figure out an assessment and even an analysis of the two of us, which would potentially be another lens to look through for this. And I've been thinking a lot about that because, a couple times you've said that you're so on the one hand, just honoring what you just said, which is that, hey, you're recognizing that according to the statistics of the average reading level and the complexity of this subject, it's like, gosh, nobody could really probably understand this entirely. And nobody does understand it entirely, right? It's science. We're like trying to figure this out.
Constantly questioning.
And I would argue that even short of one thing I do want to talk about today, which is how just fragmented and sort of how easy at least Google searching makes it to just keep to superficial research.
Interesting.
And I'm not blaming Google. It's still
you can.
It's okay. I'll blame Google.
They're certainly partially to blame. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm holding the blame for that structure and some accountability for my lack of
for sure
going deeper. Even short of that, let's say this was 50 years ago. I mean, hell, let's say this is when we were in college, when we had, kind of the first wave of fast internet. We were in that.
Yep.
When we got to Northwestern, they, had very, very fast internet lines. But, a lot of information wasn't online yet. In fact, and I'd have to double check this, but I know there's one stat, at least within the last couple of years, that a vast majority of the content on the internet is less than 2 years old.
Yeah.
And so I think that's taking everything into account, right? Because now we have now that everybody has the ability to just publish whatever the hell they want, then that's a lot of the information. But I just wonder if you think about it more in terms of that there are these different instinctual qualities of how human beings operate and how we do research. Clearly, there's reasons some people become librarians and go into research fields, and then why some don't and become mechanics or whatever. This could partially explain that. So I don't know. I'm just holding that as a question even between us, and maybe in the if we stay in this meta zone a little bit and as we try to understand, like, well, what makes somebody. I think one of the meta questions we're asking here for dozens of episodes is how do we do research? Is how do we actually arrive at reasonable conclusions? How does any of us approach these things? How do we navigate our filter bubbles and our very different online realities? I mean, that's if people don't know, Brendan and I are constantly just sharing articles and screenshots with each other so that we can penetrate those bubbles. We can
Yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah,
cross the line and like see what is across it.
yeah.
So that's a little bit more context. And in case we haven't named it clearly, the ongoing question we are in fact answering or attempting to. The first version was, is climate change real? I think we all agree that the climate is and does in fact change on its
Yeah,
own.
yes.
So the better question is climate change dominantly caused by humans?
Yeah. Well, and this is what we're endeavoring to do here on Totally Classic, where every episode we attack some subject that many people suggest you shouldn't talk about. And in this case, this is a subject that some of the biggest organizations on the planet say you shouldn't actually do too much talking about, meaning dialoguing about. And that is indeed this issue of climate change. And the reason I say that is very specific. I want to read from a 10 tips of climate health communication from the WHO released a toolkit for health professionals in March of 2024. And number 10 is don't debate the science. Don't get caught up in conversations that question climate science. It's not up for debate. If conversation veers into this territory, redirect it back to your professional expertise and the links between climate change and health. So there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, right? In every political sector, amongst every cohort, you're going to find some degree, you're going to find some conspiracy theories that dominate. Some of them taken as gospel, some of them taken as curiosity. Reading directly from that, that is the World Health Organization, which is in some ways is almost like the United Nations of health concerns, specifically telling people science is not up for debate. Now, of course, maybe they say that just to prompt more debate. Maybe they know that most people, if you tell them to not think of a pink elephant, they'll think of a pink elephant. I'm going to assume good faith in that they meant this explicitly. So this speaks to, I'm going to say that right out loud. That's what's happening in the world is people are saying, don't debate science, return to your professional expertise, which let me paraphrase it in a slightly snarky way. Just remind them that you're the expert and tell them all the ways in which ways they can be harmed because of what is happening. Now, climate science, again, is pretty exhaustive. So I can understand to some degree, like if you can get in the weeds about it, it can take too long for you to get to some sort of point in messaging. But once again, anybody who says something is unequivocally, absolutely, resolutely, yes, 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 is not a person who is thinking clearly. Anybody who says climate science is not up for debate is not practicing science. Straight up. All science is up for debate. I would go ahead and say everything. Everything is up for debate. But I say this as someone just speaking to your sort of like instinctual response and then your sort of secondary response. I don't know what categories in that particular format, but my initial in most is to debate, is to argue. So what's a new thing? Let me just press you and figure out all your arguments. And if I can come at it raw, sometimes even better, because I'm just going to ask you all the questions that I would ask if you were teaching me about this. And then if the person pushes forth a pool, right? If they propose the pool to jump in, my thing is to ask all the questions about the pool. And if that person can't answer just my initial intuitive inquiries about it, then that person, whoever introduced the pool, becomes I'm just validating whether they're even a trustworthy source to have this conversation with. And if you can't answer all those questions, or if you answer those questions in a way that for example, saying it's not up for debate, well, then you're not a trustworthy source. And I would say that to anyone. I would say that to anyone right now. If anyone says, well, yeah, but the science isn't up for debate, that is not a trustworthy source, ever. There's just no debating this. There's no questioning this. This is how it is. That's ridiculous. And for a scientist, anyone who's remotely a scientist to say that is is truly heretical. My second layer then is fact finding, because inevitably either A, I then want to destroy that person who then is introducing pools that are unsafe or that they know nothing about. And then secondly, if that person knows what they're talking about and I lose that argument, like if I ask all these questions and then I try to retort and I try to like out navigate that person and I lose, that is a fantastic motivator for me to go not lose anymore. It's literally like wrestling someone and losing and then being like, oh gosh, I better figure out how to wrestle more. I've learned so many things by losing arguments, especially ones that go on for like 6, 8, 9 hours of active arguing, things that go on for like 4 or 5 days of active arguing. I start to go, oh, dang, he's kind of got me in a corner here. I'm going to be checkmated in like 3 moves if I don't learn more. And then off I go to go cram as though a procrastinator for a test, cram a bunch of information to come back and go, okay, well, here's at least one escape move to get me out of being submitted. Our interaction is far less intense in that fashion. So that I don't learn as fast, but it really, that is my natural. So then I'll often return to my intuition. And the thing I did learn over the past month, my intuition about people who are adamant that the climate change, not only is the climate drastically changing, but it's humankind's fault. There's a very consistent lack of trustworthiness from the intuitive level. They say things like this, like it's not up for debate. And you're like, all right, well, that's not trustworthy. Or they'll say unequivocally, absolutely, yes, less. They'll say things like that. And you're like, well, that's not a trustworthy thing for anybody, for anyone to say that there's no way. I mean, what if I said about, I mean, I've said things resolutely, but when you add like multiple adjectives of resolution and then just go, it's not up for debate. Like I know scientifically from the consensus of evidence and that human life begins at conception, therefore abortion is killing, if not straight up murder. But even that, which I've been talking about and arguing about for 30, 40 years, well, 30 some odd years, right? I still wouldn't be like unequivocally, absolutely, yes, 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 and it's not up for debate. Like, what? No. What a phenomenally incorrect posture. Now, of course, I'm saying absolutely resolutely that saying absolutely resolutely is wrong, right? So I'm well aware of that little trap that I've set for myself. Expansive. Let's maintain an expansive view where we're able to explore things. So the people pushing, I've become more assured in the past month that the people pushing like climate emergency type stuff, which the WHO recommends against, by the way, saying things like climate emergency, also, just as a side note, are untrustworthy sources. So just going to, let's say, like it is consensus amongst experts that climate change is a potential existential threat and is primarily a man-made condition. Now, the consensus of experts is scientific evidence, as we've talked about on this show before, but it is the least relevant scientific evidence. So I would say in general, this whole world of like, just return to your professional expertise, or everyone has some expert that supports their particular opinion. I think I really think as a species, we need to be very ready to bypass that like at any time. Anytime you kind of get the buzz, the intuitive or empathic or whatever, like, like this is not a safe space, skip them. It's the least relevant thing anyway. Just skip them. Skip what experts say. Throw it out. Chuck it out the window. And was it New York Times? I think I shared it with you. The New York Times published this thing that I thought was sort of hilarious. What was it, like 425 or 450 million? It was like the climate over 450 million years, 425 million years. And it was so hilarious. So it came out, and then experts on both sides of the spectrum saying that climate change is just a natural thing that happens. The other side saying it's something that humans are doing and we're all going to die. Took the exact same data set, the exact same graph of 425 million years of climate, and ran the opposite directions with it. So again, in terms of chasing experts around, they're going to just have the same cognitive dissonance that you or I might have, and find their way to the same exact conclusions. but but I would just say that became very clear to me. I was like, oh my gosh, these sources are almost confessing that they're not reliable in terms of as intermediaries for these sorts of things. Well, what did you in your exploration, how did you go about it? I started on Twitter and started looking at people saying one thing or another, and then scrolling through comments and then finding find studies, because I wanted to use experts to find the arguments out, but then use them to leap into like, well, why are they saying what they're saying? Because that's like layer 2.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had outlined my approach as that I would Google climate change.
Yep.
And read articles for and against. And even that's kind of vague, right? So I'll reveal in a moment like exactly what I searched for.
Yeah.
And then look at the big movements and warnings, like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the sort of big entities that have formed, to make declarations about such things that, I don't know, it'd be convenient if those were reliable,
Yeah.
Ask a friend who's deeper into this, try to read a study. Just introduced my daughter to Star Wars, and I'm reminded of Yoda saying there is no try, but anyway.
Yeah, do or do not.
But I say that because I don't know if it's easy for you. You seem to consume these things like candy, but it is genuinely, I don't know, takes a lot for me to really get through even one whole study. My mind wanders a lot.
Yeah.
And then YouTube, which basically is Google, so it's just video Google, so I don't know. And I'd say I got through about 1.5 of these out of 5. So
Okay.
that's not great, but it's something. And I mean, I'm just revealing some things about myself and my research, and that's part of my personal goal. And actually, this endeavor with you is to improve my reasoning, improve my discipline for research, improve my or maybe reduce my tendency to just skip through headlines or even share headlines, without digging in deeper all the time. So I think this wouldn't take very long for me to run through my actual research because it wasn't all that long. So one thing is I was kind of joking, but also kind of true. It's like, oh, things haven't changed since college. And Brennan said, oh, so you procrastinate until the last night and stay up all night. And I was like, well, I didn't stay up all night, but yeah, I did it this morning. So, and I want to point out something about Google in particular that's been the case for many years at this point, but there's a predictive search where you start typing and then it starts suggesting all these other things, which is convenient in some ways, but it's also narrowing our creativity and our curiosity, because it's kind of reducing our curiosity to a multiple choice list of what the majority of people have searched for and what Google's guessing we're searching for, probably based on all kinds of information it's collected about me, because the predictive search is different for different people.
Yeah.
And so I started typing, is climate change? That's as far as I got.
Yep.
The first thing it suggests is real. Is climate change real? Is climate change getting better? Is climate change reversible? Is climate change caused by humans? Is it natural? Is climate change making hurricanes worse? Understandable in the current context.
Yeah.
And so I went with, is climate change real? Just to sort of try to get a baseline. It led me to a Brittanica, an encyclopedia article, which I grew up with Brittanica.
I did too. Yeah.
That was like,
I didn't have them, but I envied them. That's how cool they were to me.
we were lucky to have them, and then of course back then you had every year you got an addendum, and so eventually we had as many addendums as the original encyclopedias. So to find one actual thing, you would have to look through 20 books.
Amazing.
And I don't know, I really don't know. And what's happened to Britannica over the last 30 years or more, 40 years, I guess. I do know that there's a lot of advertisements on the sites, and I have an immediate reduced amount of trust when things are ad-based. And I don't know if that's fair or not in this day and age. Most things on the internet are ad-based.
Yeah.
But it's also the nature of the ads. So I'm both criticizing this and I'm admitting that I got sucked into this. I was very quickly distracted by an ad that I kid you not, said, always keep a bread clip in your wallet, and here's why. I'm
Okay.
like, well, that's very confident.
Why?
And that's really easy. Well, I never found out why, because guess what? It takes me to this life hacking list of 70 things.
No.
And then one of them was about foot fungus cure. And so I ended up watching a video about that and then finally shook myself out of it and was like, you know what? I really need to get back to the subject here. So I was proud of myself. I broke the trance, but holy crap, I'm just really trying to own and illustrate how easy it is to get off track on the old internet these days.
Yeah. I've been
Back
accused of having ADHD, but that sounds textbook.
Yeah, I pretty much need to take the test. So the Britannica article was neutral-ish, it was just kind of like, hey, here's reasons. Here's how climate change and warming and cooling works overall. And however, though, it did eventually get to a statement that it landed on saying an increasing number of scientists wonder if global and regional climates are changing too quickly for many forms of life to adapt and survive. So
yeah. That's what listen. I came to that, not to leap all over, but that was one of the first things I was going to share. That was a new revelation to me as well, which isn't the fact that we're like, oh my gosh, it's so hot. The Earth has never been this hot. That sort of, we're heading towards the hottest the Earth has ever been. That's anyone who says that. That's, as far as I can tell, that's hogwash. But
however,
what we're talking about is drastic change in short amount of time.
However, the article led with some 97% of scientists involved in climate research agree that it is extremely likely that much of the warming observed since the early 1900s results from human activities.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely led with that bias.
Yeah.
So then I Google searched humans aren't causing climate change to try to get a sense of the other. So this is where the AI kicked in. And it said the overwhelming scientific consensus is that humans are the primary cause of climate change, with the vast majority of climate scientists agreeing that human activities, particularly the burning of fossil fuels, are releasing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, et cetera, et cetera. So therefore, the AI tells me, therefore, the statement that I typed in, humans aren't causing climate change, is not supported by scientific evidence.
Wow, they stop you from the get-go. But listen there, right? So that is an unreliable summary, because they said it's not supported by scientific evidence, but the only scientific evidence they shared with you is what is considered in the hierarchy of scientific evidence, the least relevant evidence possible. So they're saying it's not supported by scientific evidence. That's true. It is scientific evidence. But as stated, it makes it sound like, oh, there's no scientific evidence for this, when really all they have to reject you is expert consensus, which is the least relevant scientific material that you could use to make an appraisal of anything. That's fascinating. That's fascinating, right? But again, I think with climate, the reason that with climate science, you're going to run into that so much is because so little of what is climate science is science in any sort of like classic way that we would learn about it in school or whatever, where you can test something, it can be replicated. You can replicate a model, but you would need all the exact same inputs, meaning you're not able to like mask science, right? You literally like stick masks on a bunch of people and you randomize a bunch of folks and you run a test. And then you run a test in another hospital system that's very much the same, and you have the same number of people, let's say, you could sort of repeat results that way and see what happens in 1 month, testing everybody every day and see what happens. With climate science, you're literally talking about just what is happening, and you can make correlative estimations based on timing. So it's a highly correlative. Why it's maybe the most confounded like science that people are going to talk about in a pop culture way, meaning because climate, as you even observed, or whatever, this is even like a Jordan Peterson like somewhat obnoxious dismissal, climate is everything. But as you actually start reading studies, you're like, oh, he's exaggerating somewhat, but oh my goodness, the extensive amount of inputs that are required, because it is everything, meaning like the climate is determined by how much is dirt, how much is sand, how much is green, how much is concrete, particulate matter in the air, dozens, I mean, hundreds, thousands of types of particulate matter in the air. Climate models, for some reason, this is another discovery. Was that climate we are, it was 485 years, not 425 years, a 485 million year history of Earth's surface temperature. And right now we are close to as cold as it has ever been. Not quite ice age, but we are close to as cold as it has ever been in human history. But we are drastically spiking up. It's not more drastic than other times through history. Like if you went back to the Mesozoic era, there's multiple leaps that are absolutely as extreme as what we're going through. However, there's been mass death throughout those time periods. Now, talking about anything in the past besides recorded history, which is all this is, this is reverse modeling. So you're reverse modeling a system in terms over millions and millions of years and being like, yep, this is what we have. Now it's based on some degrees of recording. There are certain like whatever bacterial like life forms and there's ice core things you're able to observe. There's ways to observe to make these sort of guesstimates, but it's guesswork on top of guesswork on top of guesswork on top of guesswork by extremely smart people and extremely comprehensive models. But we are phenomenally cold and tilting upwards very fast. The thing is that when this is the crazy thing about the 485 million view, is you see the rapid ascensions happen throughout history, happen a whole bunch of times throughout the 400. There's super fast rises, 7, 8, I don't know, 15, 20 times. So we're having another one of those. I don't know. This is my question that this is why I would love to actually have people who do these studies to talk to is how do we know that this rocketing back up isn't because of we had a very drastic dropping beforehand. And so throughout, it seems like the Earth is somewhat interested, maybe not anthropomorphically, but is somewhat interested in balance. And so if it rocketed down, then maybe it's going to rocket back up. We are wrecking stuff. It would be astonishing to me if human beings had like nothing to do with climate. But
we can agree on that.
But to have, I actually am skeptical of that degree of consensus. When there's 90 something people, whatever, 97, I was like, cool, let me talk to those 3%. Who are those people? Because again, we've encountered, even just through the past 4 or 5 years, you get a consensus on something and people don't. Again, this is great. You look at it, it's a slightly lower percentage of people who believe 3% of people don't think humans are evolved, right? So 2% of biologists don't think human life begins at conception. And you look at those two, we have consensus on both of those issues, and people just fully reject one of them and will argue it till the cows come home, even though we can literally observe one, like every time a new human is created, we can.
And probably the same people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Over and over again, we can kind of directly observe it scientifically.
Well, I mean, the same ideological disposition accepts one and rejects the other.
It rejects the other. It probably would parallel out similarly, right? Oh, and then the other weird thing that I just remembered as like a thing to throw out, a thing that I learned in the past month, is that climate models, which do encompass quote unquote everything, can't model clouds, which is fascinating to me, just because I think I was functioning under some degree of the apprehension of, we've got a lot of this stuff figured out, guys. Humans are pretty smart. Clouds, they've been around for a while. I've been learning about clouds since probably first grade in like the most remedial sense, right?
Stratocumulonimbus.
Yeah, exactly. And how condensation rises into the air and cold and warm temperatures and crystals form and blah, 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 right? But the best scientists in the world can't really figure out a way to model clouds in a way that mirrors reality. Now, I'm very unclear as to how, and I have the same thing for how they can go back 485 million years, or even in terms of carbon dating. I've looked into that in terms of the age of the Earth and all that sort of stuff. I still can't tell how they know, like how do they validate the metrics that they're using to make these models? Like, in what ways did they test them? They were like, okay, we know this one thing was built, and but then we didn't tell the people who tested it, and then they carbon dated this one particular ruin that we're quite sure was built in this time, and they were right when they carbon dated us and told us, you know, and like, and how far does it skew when you go too far back? So listen, I fully recognize that 485 million years of the Earth's temperature is also maybe just a very, very silly thing to say that you've nailed down. Now it's just a model, and people are excited to have a model this long. Um, but yeah, can't model clouds. It's really about a drastic change more than it is like global. Like this is why global warming. For a while, it was global cooling was the big concern when I was a little kid, that we're going to head towards another ice age, and that was the trajectory. If you look at the over the past multiple millions of years, drastic drop, very close, heading towards like ice age levels of cold. And then we've taken a wild swoop up. In some ways, we might be saving the planet. I have no idea. It might be a rocky saving process, but in order for more things to grow and to grow wilder and bigger, especially as world hunger is a problem, right? We could be aggressive because of our heating. We could be aggressively greening the earth, which means we might kill a bunch of people might die. Less people die in heat than cold, but we might kill a ton of people might die through this, but the people who will be here will be better equipped to sustain themselves on that which is growing, and that we might in some ways like aggressively green the earth in a way that we were concerned about.
Well, one curiosity I have is just, you know, how much of this is just basically the macro human ego, right? Which is like,
Yeah.
of course we're the center of all
Yeah.
of this, and something I have said very consistently. I don't hear it as much anymore, but people used to talk about saving the planet,
Yeah.
and it's like, to your point, it's like, she'll be fine. She'll do her thing.
Yeah.
She'll change.
Yeah.
She'll grow and evolve, and
Yeah.
the
Until the sun.
glaciers will melt, and the bacteria will come back, and the mammoths will come back, and all that, whatever, you know.
Yeah. Until the
Um,
sun explodes anyway.
fair. Uh, but yeah, sounds like we agree that it's extremely likely that we've had some influence given
Yeah.
extraordinary industrialization over the last, couple centuries, and
Yeah.
but quite inconclusive. So I'll just roll through the last couple of points that I looked at. One was,
Yeah.
uh, I was kind of encouraged by this until I scrolled back and looked at the date, because I found an academic article from uh, Fred Singer, a professor at the University of Virginia, global warming, man-made or natural. And I thought it was a really wonderful take, because he would pose a question like, oh, well, here's a common, question, and here's sort of how to analyze that. And I was like, oh, this is a very helpful, and it still is kind of a helpful primer. And then I noticed it was written in 2007, and I was like, oh, okay, well, it's not the most timely
Yeah. Yeah.
of information. So I sort of moved on. Then I found something from well, no, then I Googled again, are humans causing climate change? It was a bit more of a direct question. And then you start seeing, this is very common. I've done a lot of, like internet marketing over the years, and a very common technique is to have like a top 10 list or a top 9 list. And because that's just, people love that. It just sort of condenses everything into something digestible. And that's a lot of what the predictive search came up. What are the 10 causes of climate change? The 5 causes? What are the 20 causes? What are the 3 main causes?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I found this article. I think it's the smoking gun article from the Environmental Defense Fund, of the 9 ways we know humans triggered climate change. Simple chemistry, basic accounting, et cetera, basic physics. So their whole approach is like kind of simplifying it, like duh, like this is really basic stuff, and it's just which is kind of the attitude of I want to say the left, or let's just say anybody who's in the, yes, it's obvious that humans are destroying the planet, and we're to blame. Then this is funny. I just typed, did climate change, and then it's did climate change kill the dinosaurs? Did it happen before humans? Did it start with the Industrial Revolution? Did it cause Hurricane Katrina? Did it cause the Ice Age? Did it improve during COVID? There's an interesting correlation. And then that was pretty much it. And then the last thing I did was I did check in on the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, just because theoretically, this is an organization that's been around, I think, since the early 90s to do exactly this, to try to make sense of this complex thing and then offer a synthesis of it. And I did not get all that deep, but I did in the very first headline, they say human activities, principally through emissions of greenhouse gases, have unequivocally caused global warming, with global surface temperature reaching 1.1 degrees Celsius above 1850 to 1900 in 2011 to 2020. So I wondered if Biden grabbed that word unequivocally from this.
Oh yeah, and just saw that someone said it. Well, but this is the, and then this is the fantastic thing. And this is for any children who are listening, which is none. Anytime an adult says that, know that you are potentially, I mean, if you're a master chess maneuver, you're 3 moves from a checkmate. You're 3 moves from destroying that grown-up who said such a thing. And I say that to encourage you. And use all your curiosity to lay waste to anybody who says unequivocally. Oh, it's so good. Listen, I don't know how you have a daughter. I don't know how you raise your daughter, but like the words always and never to describe most everything, somewhat prohibited in my house because it reflects poor reasoning, hyperbole. Usually it tends to be regarding someone's in the house's behavior. Let's be perfectly honest. You always do this to me. You never let me do things.
Oh yeah.
So yeah,
we always catch that in the moment. That's we always catch it in the moment.
We always catch it. Yeah. So generally speaking, I mean, I'm glad I didn't stumble upon sites like that. Although in some ways it would have helped me research more, because I see stuff like that, man, and it lights me on fire. This is why I spend a ton of my online time just being like, pointing out obvious holes in people's arguments without even needing refuting evidence. You're just like, but what they're saying like can't be true. Like and here's why, right? How about basic physics or whatever, or the fact that there are confounders galore. So just saying unequivocally, it's that we're involved. Now, what they might be saying is the same thing that we're saying, which is unequivocally human beings are involved. They might say human beings are involved. 0.1% of the climate change since the Industrial Revolution has been human caused. And 99.9% of the rest of it is just, we couldn't tell you, have no idea. It's the Earth doing what the heck the Earth's going to do. We barely understand clouds. So we certainly, and we really have very poor temperature recordings. Noting that this was reported in the Toronto Sun, the Environment Canada omitted a century's worth of observed weather data in developing its computer models on the impacts of climate change. They scrapped all observed weather data from 1850 to 1949, saying it was necessary because researchers concluded that historically there weren't enough weather stations to create a reliable data set for that 100-year period. So instead, it's modeled historical data, 24 models from historical simulations spanning 1950 to 2005. Again, look, I didn't read all 88,000 studies referenced in the sort of survey that I used to arrive at sort of consensus, the consensus proof, which again, I agree. I think Brittanica is quite, as far as I can tell, Brittanica is accurate in terms of like what the declared consensus is from people who have published studies. Now, the problem is you're also talking about the consensus of published studies, which means we also know consensus is something that can be manufactured through bias, selection bias, et cetera, on and on and on and on. We also know with this whole paradigm that there is selection bias explicitly built into every modeling study. And this is why I think the climate emergency is, and I don't have an answer. How do you actually explain this and justify this and argue this out to a populace, maybe half of which is never going to even try to understand it? And even the people who want to understand it, it's so comprehensive and exhaustive as to be stifling. And it seems like the decision most people have made is we're not going to explain it to you. We're not going to argue it with you. We're just going to make you do it, which of course, all that does is make anybody who's thinking go, well, this can't be real then. Now I don't want to fall into that intuitive trap, but I don't know what else to do. Like it really does make it very difficult to productively, even as I examine it, I was like, oh, I can understand why people get so frustrated about this. And that you're like, this is extremely difficult to explain and extremely difficult to justify. So then how do you, and then even if you, and this is my problem, I don't do as well as you do as pursuing or even highlighting the necessity to pursue people who know about this, who then I can have a comprehensive conversation with. I reached out to some people, but I don't know anybody. I literally have no one in my circle who is like exhaustively familiar with the literature to talk to. And I wouldn't hesitate to say that that would probably be true of the majority of the country. Like most people in the United States of America don't have someone within their immediate circle who is like comprehensively like up on the literature on climate change. So then you really do run into this problem of like, you just end up running to a search engine and just being like, how do I pop this in? And how do I suss this out if there's, and who do I listen to? And, you know, and I've had to do that just for people who are like influential in my hearing on how people have used climate change to do authoritarian things. And I've seen the exhibits. And that's why I read one from the WHO. I was like, that's a detestable thing to say, right? Imagine if they said about the election being stolen. You don't debate the statistics on the election being stolen in 2020. You refer them to the fact that you're an expert and you talk about how damaging it was that the election was stolen. Like, no, you don't do that on anything. So and if nothing else, I've been able to find proof that yes, people have weaponized this, whether it's real or imagined, to do terrible things. But it is quite vital of like whether it's a real thing or not, and of what consequence it will be. I agree that it's happening rapidly. There's a rapid change in climate happening. It does correlate with our expansions into mass industry. In some ways, I'm almost just like, sure, fine, whatever. I think you're a liar, but let's do what we can to fix the planet. It's probably where I've landed even more so. Like I was sort of already there a month ago, but that's kind of probably where I've landed most of all now, which is like, can we do less disgustingness? Can we push less waste onto the planet? Can we dump less plastic? Can we be more responsible? And can we stop pushing that off on private citizens, by the way, too? Can we start at the top? Whoever's doing it the most, China, India, for example, as nations, and then really not just Chinese and Indian people, but industry in those places. And then same thing here, industry in the United States, and United States companies abroad doing it. Like that's where it needs to start. And so I think to some degree, I've become even more like irritable about how often it's pushed on private citizens. Like somehow if we all make these little small changes, like if we all stop using plastic straws, or we all convert to this technology, or if we all get rid of our gas stoves, or if we if we eat less meat or something, you know what I mean? That it becomes, to me, it's very weird that it keeps getting pushed on the people who don't have private planes and the people who aren't pumping literally like 99% of greenhouse gases are, whatever are, again, I'm exaggerating, but the vast majority of the concerning elements are pumped out by industry, not by citizens. So then why the citizens who comprise the tiny why are you pushing us so much? Meanwhile, you put all these parameters for other people to do it and they're not doing it. Is that why you're doing it? Because they're too powerful and they said no. So then we have to change.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great thing to land on, because that's the question I'm holding, and maybe the same sentiment, which is, you think, well, what's the point of even having an answer to this question? It's like, well,
Yeah.
hopefully it would change our behavior as a species and take better care of ourselves and our planet and everything. And so we certainly agree that there are things we could do and things we can change about how we pollute and whatnot that are good for us to do no matter what.
Yeah.
And it seems like this potentially sensationalized, overconfident opinion about climate change is a fear-based motivation tactic, whether true or not, and nobody really knows. So it's sort of funny. It's like we land on the same behavioral choice, and
yes,
but I think we're questioning the the way we're trying to motivate that behavior. And yeah, lots of people will actually reject the idea that somebody doesn't have the authority or doesn't have the right answer or doesn't have the evidence or doesn't, or even is just telling you what to do. Lots of people reject that.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's like, can we get there another way?
yeah.
So
And my best guess off that is to figure out, this would be my next like goal in this research project, is to figure out like, okay, well, let's say carbon emissions are a problem or whatever. Figuring out what industries pollute the most or pump out the most carbon. And then that's a private decision, at least I can make financially, is to stop supporting that. Like, let's say it was hair product manufacturers or whatever. That's an easy one for me. I don't wash my hair. So I would just be like, cool, we're not buying from any of those. And of course, you have to then track which companies own which companies, which is another monolith. But that is a doable project, right? Within a year to be like, okay, instead of me, you know, whatever, washing my recycling before I put it in the bin, like, would it be much more relevant for me to at least retract my economic support for any industry that continues to A, B, and C? And I did want to note, because again, I think in the US, we get more guilt about this than a lot. The EU also pumping out heavy guilt, but we get a ton of it. We and the EU pump out pretty similar amounts of CO2. Asia, which is, I mean, that's a continent, pumps out 53% of all global emissions of CO2. China pumps out 9.8 billion tons. It's 27% of all global emissions. The USA is 15%. The EU is 9, almost 10%. Russia is only 4.7, considering how giant they are. It's kind of interesting. So China is like above and beyond, like, doing most of. So if the climate is changing, China is absolutely driving climate change. So it really becomes, if it is an existential crisis, this is my conspiracy theory world. I'm going to get into a quick conspiracy theory, guys, and I'm acknowledging them as such because I don't really know. It could foster, the entire thing might be fostering like the next world war against China. Because if China's doing this and it's going to destroy us all, kill us all, then at some point you have to stop the people or the nation, right? Or if it's the person, right? If the person's releasing sarin gas into the room and it's going to kill us all, you have to stop that person. So we're going to all have to like stop and fight China, I guess. NATO versus China sort of thing. Number two, if it relates to hurricanes, because Google asked, I don't know if it's been in your algorithm as well, but I have seen just as many people blame energy weapons, cloud seeding, which has happened since the 1940s, for the increase in hurricane activity. People believe, and there's enough patents out there on weather modification, and we know cloud seeding is happening. Whatever, people do it in Dubai all the time. China does it quite a bit. So the suggestion is that these are the worsening of hurricanes is human caused, but it is not climate change related, but rather direct human intervention through weather manipulation. How cool is that? So I'm just leaving y'all to have to just ruminate on those possibilities. Go down those rabbit holes. Oh yeah, that's an ad you can click.
well, there you have it. So
There you have it.
is climate change dominantly caused by humans?
Don't know.
I'm going to go with a yes, because maybe it'll motivate somebody to change.
Yeah, and I still, sadly, I like giving yeses and nos. I have no idea. I don't know. But I love you, and I'm not going to vilify you if you hold to either side of those opinions, folks.
Love you, my friend.
Love
See you
you, sir.
soon.
Bye, brother.